Okay, welcome everyone. Thanks for coming to the session. You're in the right room if you came to see Make It Short, Make It Stick, 40 Strategies in 40 Minutes. The presenters will be John Russell, maybe you could give a wave, John Russell, Lucy Delgadillo, Brent Thomas, and Marie Lund. Take it away.
Welcome to our concurrent session. We covered this book in Spring Learning Circle. And we are 4 of those members that chose to do a presentation here. Now I'll pass it off to Marie for a little bit.
You will notice there is a note card in front of you. You're welcome to use that. If you prefer to use an electronic way of writing down your thoughts, that's fine too. But what we'd like you to do is list strategies and tools that you use to help your students master or review course content, just in 60 seconds. Think about what are you already doing or you know you could do but you aren't implementing yet. What strategies are you aware of or are you using to help your students master or review content in courses that you teach? If you have a note card and you don't have a pen, I have a delightful selection of multicolored writing utensils up here if you need one. This kind of gives us an opportunity to get our brains thinking in this avenue of what do I already know about this topic? Take about 30 more seconds. And there are some seats in the middle. There are some seats up front. Most of the back seats have been already filled. And about 10 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And if it's not too challenging to pull up, maybe.
On the screen behind.
It might, oh, do I need to change this display? We'll just skip that part then. We don't have to do them on Menti. We can just have, oh no, have I ruined it now?
It's okay.
I don't know how to get it back. Oh, it's just on here that it's, okay. Thank you, John. If you have a device, that you can go to mentimeter.com. You can text in. It should have the instructions. Where did they go? Sorry. Hit present. There we go. And you can use the code up there at the top at menti.com to answer just one of the strategies or tools that you put on your note card or that you typed into your notes. And maybe we can share a list as a group or create a list of a group as a group. Come on in, there are plenty of seats in the middle. And this is a word cloud. So if you write a sentence, all the words will be separate. I probably should have said that. You're doing great so far. Teach back, repetition, case studies, debate, conversation boards, Kahoot, bingo, quizzes, review, pair share, Jeopardy, practice test, conversation boards, earnable practice tests, maybe I lost it. Hey, take about maybe 20 more seconds to share an idea if you haven't yet. So we can see coming into this that already we have a little bit of background with this. We have some experience, obviously, with teaching, but also with giving our students tools and strategies to master and review our content.
So as I mentioned at the beginning, we covered this book shown here on the left-hand side of the slide in the Learning Circle in this spring. It was an interesting book to read, and it is relevant for not just your students, not just us as teachers, but in most disciplines I'm aware of, there's some sort of continuing education. And like not only in college, but like professional fields. And so I think that this book does a really good job distilling decades of cognitive psychology research into practical advice for learners, teachers, and anyone really that's interested in mastering complex material. We decided to split kind of this content up into 4 areas. And there is certainly some overlap in these areas: retrieval practice, self-testing, spacing, interleaving, and that's perfectly okay if there is some overlap. You could almost think of these as more general and more specific areas. So retrieval practice might be a little more general, but there are some things that don't quite fit well into some other areas, whereas maybe like self-testing could also be a more specific version of retrieval. Really, the goal here is that learning should be effortful. It shouldn't just be a sit in a classroom and you earn the grade. Like there should be some sort of work, some sort of engagement involved, but we don't want to make it difficult without a purpose. We don't want to make it difficult just because we want to be the hard professor. That's kind of bad. Bad for us, bad for the students. And we want to encourage ways for our students to struggle with the material and feel like they're actually getting somewhere when they struggle, feel like they're actually achieving something, learning something. And this is kind of this idea of creating desirable difficulties. So create this environment where students encounter these desirable difficulties. And we have to think about ways to promote engagement and encoding that actually helps the students prove retention overall. And it's okay to pick and choose some of these strategies. Not all these strategies will fit all classes or all teaching modalities. Some will fit better into what you teach. Some will fit better into what someone else teaches. But we will try to highlight a few as we go through this presentation.
Oh, that's fast. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about the first category and the typology that we presented, and it's about the retrieval. Now, for retrieval, I want you to pay attention to the ability to store, retain, and recall, but then also to apply. Store is kind of easy, and that's what the students do when they cram all the information before the test. And you have good result within 24 hours. But if you were to test that knowledge 2 months later, it's gone. Because they didn't really create the neural path to be able to retrieve that information. So that's what we're going to be talking about here. How we create that in order not only to retain it, but also be available to recall the information when we need it and to apply it in different situations. Strategies 1 and 2 is what the authors call passive retrieval. These are usually just one single fact. That's how we know, for example, our phone number, the year that we were born, the code to enter our office or the house, etc. And it's not so much, that is something that really opened my eyes. It's not so much that we do it repeatedly, is that we actually retrieve it multiple times. So I can tell you a lot of things, but until you don't retrieve it yourself, you don't make that effort, it doesn't happen. In fact, one of the tenets of the book is for knowledge to be deeper and durable, it requires effort. So this one, it will be the equivalent to System 1, if you are familiar with Kahneman, in System 2. This is the automatic response. We don't have a lot of things. Now, in the frequent log state testing, there are 2 parts. One is the instructor gives a log state quiz after a reading, and they say that is way more effective than having the students to reread the information. They highlight and everything. Sometimes they just lead to the illusion of knowledge. When you see it and highlight, it's when you actually being forceful to retrieve by answering a few questions. And then they also talk about self-testing, but I'm going to not talk about that because there is going to be a whole section on that. Cue-dependent retrieval, I will characterize it as mnemonic techniques. And this could be, rough terms, into two categories. This could be environment cues, or it can also be physical cues. Environmental cues is, for example, you have seen when people have an accident or there is an assault and they send the victim or the person to the scene, because there are going to be some environmental cues, maybe the noise, maybe the temperature, maybe sounds, maybe smells, that will bring that knowledge into. Or if you speak a second language, you learn it, but you haven't been in that country. The moment that you go, you start, oh, I still remember, because of the environmental cues. The other one, the physical cues, are very interesting because they are intentional and they work by association. So give you a quick example that it came to me when I was in the learning circle, and then one example that I use in my classroom in a spring semester. When I was preparing to take the oral PhD examination, do you remember those? So I'll ask my major professor where the oral examination was going to take place. She said, it's going to be in the small conference room. So I say, can I study in there? So I went and sit in that room and start observing the furniture, the ornaments, the table, the chairs, and every single physical thing I will associate it with a theory, maybe a research method, whatever it is. So I start thinking about it will trigger my memory because the information was stored, but I wanted to make sure that I was able to retrieve it at that moment. Then what I did in class, I was teaching exactly in a classroom like this. I was teaching about, I teach house and finance. I was teaching about the different loan programs, FHA, conventional USA program, etc. And there was a table. So I came to the classroom, I put the table in front, and I told the students, look at that table and associate with that table all the characteristics of an FHA loan. How about the height? How about the legs? What are they made? What is the color, etc.? What's the utility? And so they get very creative. They start to go, ooh, nice and good. So this will be the physical cues, more mindful. Retrieval for performance, I'm not going to talk about that. Very useful for, well, I'm going to talk briefly, but very useful for clinical settings. And when you are interested in that people regurgitate that information, but be able to apply it. And what the hint that they give us in here, or the advice, is pay attention to the effort, the process, rather than necessarily the outcomes or the result. Because you can use generative learning when paired with corrective feedback. In generative learning, basically you have the student trying to do the effort to remember the things without you being your crutches. The example that they provided in the textbook is when a kid starts learning how to ride a bicycle, that they have the training wheels. So if you go to the rescue every time they're trying to fail, and you don't need them to learn the effort, it will be the same with us. So if we are going to provide corrective feedback, delay that feedback. Let them struggle a little bit. Provide the feedback is completely wrong, but let them struggle instead of going to the rescue immediately. Outdated through consolidation, I will not talk about that because there is a section on consolidation. The last one that I want to talk that I didn't bold is elaboration. This is another good one that I apply in a spring semester when I was exposed. Elaboration is asking students to basically tell it in your own words. You present the concept and you say, now tell me in your own words. The application that I did is when I was teaching bonds and stocks. And I say, let's play a game. I'm going to pretend, well, that part is not pretend, that I'm an immigrant, but I'm a LEP, which is the Limited English Proficiency Client that come to the counseling center. And that in the pre-assessment that you gave me from 0 to 100, I only scored 20 in financial literacy. So how will you explain in layman terms, in your own words, what's the difference between a bond and a stock to this person? And so they have to elaborate on that. And then the summary is self-explanatory, and I'm going to pass it to you. I don't, we can skip it. Okay, so let's do retrieval in practice. So I was going to test that to you. So I was going to kindly ask you if any one of you in 30 seconds or less can take one of those strategies that I just explained and explain it in your own words. Okay. Did you?
You said cue retrieval, I think, was one. Physical cues was the example.
For the physical cue? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, using a table and focusing on a table and learning about that as a way to remember something.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about self-testing, which, yes, you may think, okay, this kind of seems like a more specific version of retrieval practice. You're not completely wrong. As I said, there's overlap, and it's fine that there's some overlap. Here are a few examples of what this could look like. You could encourage these either in class or encourage your students to do these types of things outside of class. Sometimes it's just making the resources available to allow them to do these practices. The three I'm going to talk about or focus on are bolded here. Two of these are a little easier. One of them relies mostly on me, and then the other two rely more on the students to take some initiative and accomplish these on their own. So flashcards, Marie's going to talk a little bit more about some other methods of flashcards, but in general, I encourage my students to use this method as a way to review and learn all of the reagents and reactions needed. I teach organic chemistry. A lot of them are medical or pre-medical students, pre-dental, pre-vet students, and so they have to get very good at understanding terms, understanding concepts, and being able to connect them. So flashcards are a good way to practice these reactions, reagents, all the many reagents that they need to know throughout the course of the semester. The second one here is create and answer your own questions, or as I phrase it, make up your own questions. Even if it starts as looking at some of the practice tests or practice problems or example problems that I provide them, having the students then take those questions, change a couple of things, change the length of the carbon chain, change how carbons are connected to each other, change the halogen, change what the base is, change something about this reaction, about this problem that I give them, and then give it to their friend and have their friend solve it. So it's a little bit of combining 13 and 14 here, creating your own questions and teaching someone else, kind of. You're essentially giving your friend a pop quiz that they maybe didn't expect. And so this is one way that I encourage my students to kind of try to get inside my brain and understand the types of questions that I like to ask. And then quiz each other, quiz their friends on how well they actually understand that material. And then the third practice I'm highlighting here is practice tests or practice quizzes, practice exams, practice questions, examples, whatever phrase you want to make up. Or if you're in a writing class, like practice writing prompts or practice topics that you want them to write about. And this primarily has the goal of recreating that testing experience as closely as possible. So try to, especially if your students are struggling on the test taking, have them time themselves, have only the access to what they would have in the exam, whether it's in the testing center, a proctored environment, or the classroom. Have them try to recreate that testing environment as closely as possible. Even if it even going as far as sitting in a specific seat in a specific classroom, if it is an in-classroom test. Why does self-testing work? Why is this something that we want to encourage? Well, it requires active recall, not passive review. Rereading material could be good. However, this is just kind of reinforcing an illusion of knowing. You think you understand it, but you don't really know what's going on until you test yourself on that information. And same thing with listening. Just going to lectures isn't enough. It creates these desirable difficulties, because usually all of these self-testing practices, the answers are available. So they can struggle with it, but then see what that answer is, or they can reach out for help on what that answer is. It helps identify what is and isn't known, especially if the student or the learner is being honest with themselves about what they do or don't know. And it helps boost this long-term retention because of repetition and retrieval. So that will bring us to our next practice of spacing.
Spacing is exactly what it sounds like, spacing out the learning. These are, I want to count right, 11 different ways that you could, or approaches you could use to space learning with your students. And some of it is just simply allow students time to forget. Sleep helps. The book said there are studies that say that sometimes sleeping, taking a day, and coming back even just the next day is enough time sometimes to forget or to need reminders. Obviously, we want to avoid mindless repetition, because as instructors, we all know that that may be helpful to answer a few questions on a test tomorrow, but not enough to remember it 3 weeks from now or to apply it in the field, which I think ultimately is what we're all working towards, is helping our students apply what they're learning here into the field in the real world. So here are some different ways that we can space learning with our students. A few I specifically want to talk about are a way of using flashcards that is called the Leitner box. A German scientist uses this, or it's named after him. Building time to reflect, building that into your curriculum, into your courses. Drafts of projects and papers, that can be spacing, because we are having students intentionally record ideas, take some time away, come back and revise and reflect and improve those ideas over time, and mental rehearsal. Yes, okay, sorry. A few ways that I do these in my classes. I work over in teacher education and leadership. My target audience for my students, I work with elementary education teachers, and they will in turn work with children between the ages of 4 and 12. So that's who I keep in mind when I use these practices. I have journal entries similar to what we did at the beginning of the presentation today. Make a list of all the strategies or tools you use to do this. I start my classes a lot of times that way to help my students kind of shift gears into wherever they've come from, now into what we're going to be studying today. Sometimes it's like today in this presentation, what do you already know about the topic we're going to talk about? And sometimes it's reflecting on what we've talked about in previous classes. It's addressing the readings that we have done or assignments that we have done in the class. I use journal entries anytime we have a student presentation in class, which is one of the requirements. After the presentation, students have to write their own journal entry that the class will respond to help them retrieve information that they have observed, listened to, engaged with, or learned in the presentation that was given. And I will sprinkle journal entries throughout the classes. Most of my classes meet once a week for 2.5 hours. So I'll sprinkle these journal entries throughout classes to help students retrieve information or reflect on information, or mentally rehearse what they're going to say when we go into a small group discussion, or when we have a whole group discussion, similar to maybe a think, pair, share. One of the target groups that we focus on in one of my classes is English learners. So students who do not speak English at home or who are learning English at school as a new language. And for those students especially, having an opportunity to process a prompt or question, to write down or to articulate what they want to say, practice with a partner, and then share with the whole group is a really effective and helpful way to build their confidence with speaking a new language, but also to build their confidence and familiarity with content, because by the time we're sharing with the whole group, they've already had 3 or 4 opportunities to hear someone else's idea, to think about what they want to say, and then to even revise or edit that before they share out loud with everyone. The Lightner box is a way of using flashcards, and what this does is it has, you have 4 different boxes and a stack of flashcards. In box 1, I am holding all of the high frequency information that I need, that is most important that I need to learn, but also that maybe I make frequent mistakes with, that I need additional help to understand or to retrieve. And then in the second box, I put things that, I don't make as many mistakes on these. I mostly remember them. I could remember them with a quick cue or a reminder or a hint or something. The third box, I need less help and it's easier for me to remember. And the fourth box, I've kind of internalized those. An example of that, I have a child who just completed 4th grade, and in 4th grade in Utah, we focus on times tables in mathematics. So 1 times all the way up through 12, and we do our times tables 1 times everything up to 12, 2 times up to 12, everything up to 12, right? So we have flashcards at home that we're practicing those with, because in 4th grade, they really need to be able to just pull those out, because they start doing 3- and 4-digit multiplication and division, and it helps with that. My son was really easily able to memorize his 1 through 5, because those are pretty easy, and his 10 and 11, but 6, 7, 8, 9, and 12 were more challenging for him to recall. So I added those flashcards in multiple times. We had extras of those. So he might only ever see 2 times 5 1 time in the flashcard deck, but he might see 6 times 7 3 times in the card deck, if that makes sense. And so you need more frequency with that. You can either put it in box 1 where we review it more frequently, or you can add additional of the same information so you stumble upon that card more times. We can use with flashcards images. It doesn't always have to be words. I used to teach Spanish, and we would do images on one side and the word in Spanish on the other side. So when I see the image of an apple, on the other side it says manzana, and I, over time, begin to internalize when I see that, I just think manzana. I stop thinking, that's an apple, apple is manzana, manzana is apple. I just go straight to manzana. Matamoscas is a game we used to play in Spanish class where we put the content up here, and it's a kind of matching, I suppose, where students have a fly swatter, which is a matamoscas, and when I say the word, they tap the picture, which is a lot of fun if you're in K-12, and surprisingly, undergraduates also have a lot of fun slapping a screen with a fly swatter. And then drafts. I have a project in my classes that's called Educated Human Being. I pull the name of that from a project, or from a text that we read. And the first semester that I did this project, I just said, here's the project. I get you started. We spend a week getting started. They have to submit a plan saying, this is how I plan to complete this. These are the steps I will follow. This is the help I need from you. And then 2 weeks before the end of the semester, I said, hey, how's everyone doing on that? And literally half of my class in all 3 sections said, what? And I thought, oh, whoops, instructor error. So I have since then built in check-ins throughout the semester where they have to submit pieces. And it's okay if in a check-in they say, I've been really busy, I haven't worked on anything yet, I've made no progress, but here is what I plan to do between now and the next check-in. I have 3 check-ins in the semester in week 6, 9, and 12. And that way, no one gets to the end of the semester and pulls an all-nighter to complete it. Or if they do, it's a conscious decision because they've had 4 opportunities to tell me how they plan to complete the work and specifically what support they need from me, if any. And those check-ins are 0 point, the keynote speaker mentioned today. So they don't get points for doing them. It helps to keep them on track, which is why they're allowed to say, I have done nothing, or I've done everything. And some students submit the project halfway through, and I say, hang on to that till the end of the semester because we have more learning to do. Consolidation is a process that makes all of this retrieval possible. And I'm going to read a quote from the text because I'm terrible at paraphrasing. But basically, consolidation incorporates all of these pieces that you see here on the slide, and they say explicitly in the text, it is internalizing information and logging into long-term memory requires a process of consolidation in which memory traces are strengthened, given meaning, and connected to prior knowledge, a process that unfolds over hours and may take several days. The increased effort required to retrieve the learning after a little forgetting has the effect of re-triggering consolidation and further strengthening memory. So from my Spanish days, ojo just means pay attention or be careful. This can feel less productive in the moment for you as an instructor and for students. Students do have to work harder to retrieve that information or to retrieve the knowledge they need to perform a skill because it focuses on long-term memory and because it strengthens memory and connections in the brain. It reconstructs learning and you rebuild those connections between that prior learning and the learning happening right now. Especially as new instructors, if any of you are new in your first 3 years, it's really easy to avoid this because it feels harder. But the research says learning is deeper and more meaningful when it's effortful. So sometimes taking a little more time to engage in these kinds of practices can have a bigger payout in the end because it takes more work. And that takes us to interleaving.
Okay, so we've been sharing with you for about 30 minutes, which, if you're anything like me, means you lost your attention span about 25 minutes ago. So it's time for a quiz. And don't answer this the way that you think we might hope you answer. Be honest. And I'll answer this for you. I'm going to ask you to hold up a finger, or one or two fingers, depending on your answer here. But if you were sitting down to study something, how would you approach it? What would your gut instinct go-to technique to be? I teach in the Department of Math and Statistics. Let me tell you, every math textbook I have ever seen would teach me to study this way. Number one, study one topic at a time. So go ahead and share, hold one or two fingers. What would your go-to method to be? Okay. Todd is one of my colleagues in the department. He held up 2 fingers. I think that's awesome. I was not trained that way. And it was interesting for me to read this book with my colleagues here and hear that might not be the most effective thing. And it certainly doesn't feel natural for me. When I sit down to really study and learn a topic, I really want to understand that topic. And I really try to focus on that. So interleaving in itself, as we mentioned earlier, and this is me being a bad presenter because instead of quizzing you on what interleaving is and asking you to recall, I'm just reviewing. But the practice of mixing multiple topics at a time, studying more than one thing at a time, it can not feel natural to many of us. Most of you that answered, I noticed, held up just one finger, not 2. That's not necessarily our gut instinct. If, for example, let me go off Marie's flashcard. This isn't what I was going to do, but she's talking about, like, I got to talk about this. If we're learning basic math facts and we're using flashcards, probably we have a stack of multiplication, but did we throw in any addition or subtraction in there? That's usually not how we go about studying. It feels disruptive. It feels counterproductive often. When students engage in this, typically they don't feel like they're obtaining as high a level of mastery. They feel like they're not learning as much. John talked about, well, and we've all kind of hinted at it, there is a level of desirable difficulty. We want something to require a little work from us in order for us to learn it and master it. A nice example they give of obtaining this desired difficulty in the text, the book we read, the authors go to a kind of a case study. A baseball team out of California, a college baseball team, took some skilled hitters. So these are some of their skilled athletes. These are not beginning athletes. These are some of their athletes that are already skilled at hitting, and they kind of put them through 2 different kind of practice routines. Routine number 1 was, okay, we're going to have you try to hit 15 fastballs right in a row. We're going to try to have you hit 15 curveballs right in a row, and then maybe 15 sliders. So they saw 3 different types of pitches, and they blocked them, 15 fastballs, 15 curveballs, 15 pitches. And then they took another group where instead of blocking 15 at a time, the pitches that the batters had to face were randomized. So they still might see 15 fastballs, but not all right in a row. And during practice, the group that was hitting the 15 pitches that were blocked, 15 fastballs, 15 curveballs, and so on, they performed much better in practice. After 6 weeks, they kind of evaluated their performance in games, and it was the group that had the randomized pitches in practice that were seeing the most benefit in actual performance. So they gave that as some evidence that interleaving can be kind of more difficult while you're doing the learning, but more beneficial once the learning has kind of moved on and you've obtained a level of mastery. So the last of our 40 examples that we promised you in our abstract on interleaving. So we've already kind of talked a little bit about just mixing up things as we go along, and I'll give kind of 2 more examples of what that could look like in a classroom here in a minute. Just when you're doing the self-quizzing that we've talked about, don't make it all about the same thing all at once. Mix those things up. It's okay. Maybe the topic you're studying in a math course, sometimes it might be really hard to say, hey, I need to study this and another topic from the course at the same time. So maybe your interleaving looks like, okay, I'm in a math class, but I'm also in a biology class or an art class, and you intermix the 2 subjects as you study.